Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to outline as well our continued concerns about this bill. Throughout the debate, many of us have asked very reasonable questions for more information, and that simply hasn't been forthcoming. The minister's brief remarks about better supporting businesses, more effective and accountable government, and modernizing the way we support economic development are all aims that I think we probably all share. But they actually don't tell us anything about how that's going to be undertaken and why this change is necessary. Mr. Speaker, the decisions that the government is taking are not in a vacuum. In fact, the decisions around structure and organization and mandate are nested within systems of public administration, public policy, and political governance that have actually evolved over hundreds of years. And really, in many cases, it's hard to say that new ideas haven't already been considered, that we've actually been around the block of where ministers have decision-making around what economic development projects are funded. And actually, for very good reasons, we chose to move away from that. So perhaps the government considered this in their review, but they've resisted sharing any of the review, analysis, and decision-making that is guiding current policy. We could have a much better discussion in this House, in fact, if we were able to access and understand the foundations for these policies and respond to specific issues. I am going to take some time in this third read to outline where I see the challenges and difficulties with the current path of this government, as well as discuss my specific concerns with the new Invest Nova Scotia organization as detailed in Bill 214 and 215. So first of all, I've talked about the fact that we've actually moved away from a culture of patronage, that we've actually thought about how we build governments. So in the 1980s, this all came together in a movement called New Public Management. And the idea of rethinking how public management, how governments were run, was undertaken emerged due to a few concerns. So there was a feeling that there's a need to focus on performance and improve performance in response to increasingly complex government programs, at the same time as there were often central budget reductions. And I think the idea around the increasingly complex government programs is really important. So combining a Nova Corps, the functions of a Nova Corps and NSBI, again, I haven't seen the analysis, but you know what? I bet you that makes a lot of sense. But I also think that that encompasses a huge range of activities that are quite complex. And I think that's why we had boards and governance models that brought expertise together to adequately address everything from venture capital through to supporting businesses to expand to export. So. And the other part about the new public management and public administration that was really important was a recognition for the increased professionalization of the public service based on merit. So not hiring of friends, getting away from nepotism, but also really realizing that there's a core set of values and ethics, as well as skills and training that are necessary to effectively and accountably, as the minister said, implement government programs. And there were a few other key items that I think, for me, are what has been missing from this discussion and the discussion of other bills. So a couple of the other principles were around results-based management. So what are you aiming for? How are you going to measure progress? How do you know you're on the way there? And how do you know when you've gotten to your goal? And as I said, an increased focus on public sector values and ethics so that we weren't making decisions that favored our friends, that we were making accountable decisions based on the results that we wanted to see. And an increased emphasis on evaluation in response for the need for improved efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability. And again, because we don't have access to what happened during the Crown Corporations Review, we have no idea what sort of evaluation work was undertaken. And so it's within that we have to look at Crown corporations and arm's length institutions as a really important policy instrument. And I think, during second reading, I outlined some of the reasons why we want to have Crown corporations in their current/past form in Nova Scotia. So I think it's really important that often we ask Crown corporations to undertake sector activities or undertake initiatives that are in the public interest, that are absolutely for the public good, but they're also quite risky. And they also involve the need to have a diversity of perspective and approach, be able to respond to emergent issues. And I can think of really export, venture capital. I mean, these are all areas that are constantly evolving. And we need to limit the liability of government, but retain some public interest. The minister has expressed concern about the fact, well, if the minister always has accountability, so what's so different about what's going to happen now? And in fact, the answer is it's very different. So normally with agencies, boards, and commissions, or crown corporations, the setup is a statute that outlines their roles and responsibility. Appointments to the board are made by governing council, which I think we all understand, but maybe some folks who are going to be really bored about public administration really soon don't necessarily know. But as a bureaucrat in the Department of Finance, I spent a lot of time reviewing all the applications we got from amazing Nova Scotians who wanted to serve on agency boards and commissions, and we provided an evaluative recommendation to government about those board appointments. So again, it's not about handpicking. It's not about giving these spots to your friends. It's actually about a process to establish a board that can do all the things that boards are supposed to do. So boards, the whole idea of board management and corporate governance is in and of itself its own specialty, and we ask that corporate governance provides the structure of how decisions will be made, and that in ways that maybe make it more important about the how rather than even the what. And I have a couple of documents that I'll table from the C.D. Howe Institute and the Ivey School of Business and the University of Calgary. I'll table them just there. Thank you. About corporate governance and crown corporations. And I would say that across those reports, and they're all quite recent, there were some really important pieces around crown corporations and their boards. So noting that ineffective or dysfunctional corporate governance in crown corporations increases the odds that organizations will veer from mandates, inefficiently manage operations and investments, or fail to adapt to changing external circumstances. And they all really emphasize the fact that a crown corporation requires a rigorous approach to governance. They also talk about the fact that the board provides an important supervisory and guidance role for the head of the organization, so in most cases with a crown corporation, the CEO. And of course, also the important roles of board committees. So we have board committees that are strategy, audit, communications, but these are all things that we're losing. So what's being proposed here is the loss of a board of governors to be replaced with an advisory council that simply doesn't hold the same level of fiduciary responsibility and engagement in the process. And in fact, it's not clear from the bill that's been tabled how that advisory committee will be used. I had a chance to look around across the country in terms of other organizations like, sorry, I just gotta find these in my notes, like NSBI in particular, to understand how they were structured. And so what I will say from reading various acts across the country is that really they are structured like we had with NSBI or with Innovacor. So in various cases, so like in Alberta, in Invest Alberta, for instance, the minister may attend meetings but doesn't have a vote. So is actually not involved in the picking of winners and losers for economic development decisions. Innovate BC, the minister is not on the board. In Investment Manitoba, the minister is allowed to appoint 1 of 9 members of the board. Invest Ontario, the minister is more engaged by designating a chair and a vice chair, and of course reviewing the bylaws and being able to issue policies and directives. But again, there's still a board of governors that actually is vested with the responsibility for decision making. and I would say Opportunities New Brunswick, PEI, and Newfoundland Labrador similarly. So I think we're standing out by developing a structure that actually puts the minister at the end of this. Instead of having the minister responsible for the structure, the governance, making sure the bylaws are in place, making sure the governor and council process is running well, and trusting that board of directors to make good decisions, the minister's going to be making decisions about who gets funding and who doesn't. And I think that's a very dangerous switch and return in the way we're making decisions in this province. And recently in Manitoba in 2017, they also undertook a long review of Crown corporations and agencies, boards and commissions, and actually developed an overarching act to guide decision-making for Crown corporations, and that really sets out what the minister's roles are. And again, in this case, the minister, and I will table this after, I didn't bring it with me, but in 13.1, the minister may, with the approval of the Lieutenant Governor and Council, issue a directive to a corporation respecting matters of policy, requiring the corporation to conduct an organizational review, requiring the corporation to do something in accordance with its approved annual business plan, or prohibiting it from doing anything inconsistent, to ensure practices of 2 or more corporations are consistent, and to ensure that 2 or more corporations act in concert. So here we can see very clearly and specifically what role is set out for the minister and their accountability, but it's not the decision making. And it goes on to say in 17.3, despite any other act, no member of the Executive Council shall be appointed as chair, vice chair, or member of any board. So then separating those powers and governance and decision making. I walked through during an earlier reading of this bill as well this idea of review. So I do have the minister's mandate letter to table because again we have very few publicly available documents that actually outline how we got to here. So certainly the Minister of Economic Development is called upon to cooperate across mandates and across departments and also to be part of the ABC's review. But that's about all that's given in the mandate letter, and I can table that. And then of course I love the infamous 2-page report that then got spat out, and this is what we know about what happened during that review. So I think that's insufficient. And I mean, the minister has given us some hints along the way. In the previous reading, she talked about this would be one particular objectives of this process is that there will be one place to call. Great, but I think, I think we're far beyond, sort of single window service initiatives in public administration. Today she talked about better support and modernize, but yet we don't know what this means. And it's so, because we don't know what it means, we don't know what was evaluated, we have no idea why this particular structure is being proposed, and we are greatly concerned by this consolidation of power. We have from the same excerpt from Hansard that I just tabled, the minister said, whether we call it an advisory board, I would assure all those present that the opinions of those from the business community will always be held in the highest esteem and consideration. And that's a lovely sentiment, and I think we would all share that, but we have structures and mechanisms that actually sort of put the rubber on the road, that actually make this operationalized and accountable.
Order, please. I would ask that since you made a quote that the member table those members. Okay, thank you. Thank you. The honourable member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
And in the same Hansard excerpt that I've already tabled, we also asked the minister, okay, great, so how does this all fit into an economic development strategy? Because that's the other piece that's lacking, is that it's not clear to us what are the goals. And the minister said that we should be able to grasp the basic tenets of the economic development policy, which is tenets is defined as a principle, belief, or doctrine generally held to be true. And so about the only principle, belief, or doctrine that I can discern from the proposal that's made here for Invest Nova Scotia and for other organizations is that power is being consolidated in ministers' offices and ultimately the Premier's office. I think I've already tabled these documents, but I'll table them again, and hopefully the minister will have a chance to have a look at them. I keep talking about an economic development plan, and maybe it's just not clear what I'm talking about. But if you have a look from 2022 from Stronger BC, BC's economic plan, and so in here, it outlines the economic vision, mission, what sectors, how they need to grow, how government's actions do that. It considers climate action within that, and also they have metrics that they're publicly accountable for. Sorry, I'm waving them around. I'll just table them. I'm just going to table them. Sorry. I'm a hand talker. It's like part of my heritage. I keep hitting everything. It is. And so, I think, again, I think asking the Minister for Economic Development for an economic development plan, particularly in sort of the state that the world economy is in, is not an unreasonable expectation, and would really allow us to better understand why in this role the minister is seizing control of private sector development investments in the province. I shared in law amendments similar concerns voiced by the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, who spoke at length about the concerns and misunderstanding they felt in the Crown Corporation governance model for this and for Build Nova Scotia and for other initiatives. And so I guess I'll come to a close, and I'm sure everyone's enjoyed talking about Crown Corporation governance. I'm sure people have. Thank you. So, and when I was doing reading for this and thinking about this and wondering, how are we here that we have a government that thinks that all Crown corporations should actually not be Crown corporations, should be arm's length, it shouldn't be arm's length, should actually be under the control of ministers. Where did this all come from? And in fact, there is a new term that a lot of folks like Peter O'Coin and others are using, talking about the new dynamic of the new political governance. So instead of new public management, which was what we worked at for decades, in fact, this new political governance, and that after fighting our way out of a political culture of patronage and nepotism, we're going back into an age of overtly political management. And I think there are many pitfalls to consider. We know that political factors can impact the efficient operation and decision-making of whether they're Crown corporations or departments. So, for instance, we have seen that people have been handpicked to lead these organizations, and that is not part of how we had built our public administration traditions here in Nova Scotia. It's causing great uncertainty, and and will be, I think, also met by the possibility of thinking about elections, thinking about government priorities in the decision making for private sector investment, which in a Crown corporation model, that's not what would be taking place. And in one of the reports that I tabled from the C.D. Howe Institute, they said, governance is a key element, and a Crown that is well-governed should be expected to achieve success at balancing the delivery of services and conducting business in the public interest while operating in a commercial or business-oriented manner. We are greatly concerned by this initiative and others by this government that puts control back in the hands of ministers. We won't be supporting this bill, and what we would hope for is better information and better reporting from the government going forward about how decision-making and investments are being made in the department. Thank you.